Hey everyone, this is Tim, and I live in what I think is fair to say kind of a bubble of people who think they're woke, somewhere on the woke scale. And within my life, I have a word that's been floating around that I feel very conflicted about. And that word is ally. So here's what I'm struggling with. This idea that, especially among progressive white folks, that thinking about people who are different than you, look different than you, have different life experiences, whatever, the idea that thought process is somehow special and not just common decency kind of rubs me the wrong way, bothers me. So I have this vague sense of just like lingering guilt. I have this internal conflict. I guess the only thing really for me to do right now is reach out to my black friend and co-host of this show, Camille. Can't you just solve? Can't you solve my problem?
Yeah, me as your black friend, I can solve it all. I know that you're joking.
I am joking.
Right, but what I think you're going through is this whole thing that I see a lot of white people do, which is twist themselves into knots to try to prove like how down for the cause they are.
Yeah, totally. And we are not certainly the only people in St. Louis going through this.
No, I actually hear this kind of conversation happening quite a bit, and it happened recently, like in our own studios. Hi.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Liz. This is Liz Kramer and Jenny Simone. They're besties, and they're pretty like-minded.
So here's a little bit about Liz. She makes her own granola, works on a college campus, and likes to ride her bike everywhere.
I grew up in Ann Arbor, which is a town full of wandering ex-hippies.
And Jenny, she's a Cali girl, and she works with us, actually. She's St. Louis Public Radio's diversity fellow. She covers race and class like us.
So often that just means like you are brown and you are going to like cover race issues. Thank you. Maybe sometimes.
So you may have picked up on the fact that Liz is white and Jenny is not, and neither would call themselves an ally.
And being an ally is like an always aspirational goal that right. I know that I'm never going to be.
I think similar to you, I consider myself somebody who needs allies, but I don't necessarily like think of myself as an ally because I'm always thinking about like how white allies, quote unquote, can be doing better.
But this got us thinking, how can you do better if you aren't even sure how well you're doing right now?
So we thought, why don't we try and come up with a solution?
Yeah, we called up one of St. Louis's best known diversity experts. You'll hear from her a little bit later on. And we asked her for help to make a skills test for being an ally.
And she agreed, which was cool.
Yeah, and this is why we brought Jenny and Liz to the radio station, put them in separate studios, and administered what we're calling the Ally Quiz.
This is great. Okay.
I feel very confident that I'll say things that are wrong.
And some of the answers that Liz and Jenny gave are pretty revealing.
I can't imagine who would do that.
So I think, no, I have not done that, but I have thought about it.
Yeah, I actually have done this.
No, that's weird.
Love these questions. This is really great.
What a good bonus question.
So we should acknowledge that the Ally Quiz is not scientific in any way. We put together 10 questions with the bonus for extra credit, and some of the scenarios may seem obvious to you on the surface.
But let's be honest here. Is anything having to do with race or other social issues ever that simple?
Yeah, not so much.
Yeah, so think about how you might respond to this test and follow along as we try and answer this big question.
Is there a right and a wrong way to be an ally?
Allies in a world of too much choice. I only need your voice. Tell me you care. I'll be anywhere for you.
So before we get into the quiz, we're going to start with an official definition of ally that fits this context.
I think an ally generally speaking, is looking at systemic and institutional work to end the oppression in whatever group they're not the targeted group in.
This is Amy Hunter, and she's one of the St. Louis region's most dynamic race scholars.
And if her voice sounds familiar to you loyal listeners, that's because she was in our first episode of this season, Jesus Was Black.
As someone who identifies as Christian, that means that I fight for the High Holy Days to be vacation days for everybody, that my Jewish friends don't have to take an extra personal day, that they get their High Holy Days off, just like I would get off Easter or Christmas, for example.
Amy immediately said yes when we floated the idea of an ally quiz.
Yeah, it may have been the fastest email reply from a prospective source that I've ever gotten.
Literally, I was like in the middle of doing something else, stopped what I was doing, and like, well, why don't you ask this? Because I get asked these questions all day, right? And just started like, I think there's like a 3-minute response delay on when he sent it to me, and then I sent it back to him. The questions that I wrote were questions that I often hear other white people give each other, but also questions that they will like talk to me about, right? So, do you know who Melissa Harris Perry is? Like, I do. How about Ida B. Wells? I'm like, are we black facting this? Because I know like a lot. And not because I'm black, but because I actually do this for a living.
Knowing this, we were really interested in what questions Amy would put on her quiz.
And so were Jenny and Liz, who are taking this quiz. And we're guessing probably you guys are interested to know what questions Amy wrote as well.
So we're just going to get out of the way and listen as both Liz and Jenny take the quiz in separate studios.
Have you ever told someone that you know someone else black so they know you have a black friend? Definitely not, but I have heard that before.
I can't think of an instance where I did that, but I can think of times of me thinking that's something I could do and then being like, why would I do that? 2, have you ever worn a safety pin or a pink hat? Aren't these great signals you are an ally? So no, I've never worn a pink hat. I did wear a safety pin very briefly, and part of the reason why I did that was because I work on a college campus, and I was thinking about how would I self-identify to students that I'm someone that they can talk to.
No, I did not do either of these things.
Have you ever gently brushed up against a black person's hair so you could feel it on the, quote, low? Of course, you realize it would be rude to ask to touch it. What the hell? What? Why would you do that? Why would you try and brush up against somebody so you can touch their hair? Oh, that's like really uncomfortable. No, I have not done that.
No, definitely not. Although I can't imagine what kind of person would actually answer yes to this.
Question 4 is, have you ever asked someone that did not work in a store or restaurant a question for employees, like, do you know where the blank is? Both say yes.
I can think of other times that I've misidentified people because I've made assumptions about their identity.
But I've definitely had this where people have asked me if I work in a store or restaurant when I didn't, and I was just a person who was enjoying the same things that other person was.
Question 5 asks, do you have more Black Lives Matter t-shirts than black friends? Both say no, but Liz has this one caveat.
I have 3 Black Kids Matter buttons that I bought from the kids who hang out on South Grand. That's less than my number of black friends. That's a great question.
Question 6, do you know at least 3 black scholars or authors on race? And both Jenny and Liz do.
Like, obvious ones would be Claudia Rankine and Ta-Nehisi Coates.
All right, now we are at question 7.
Do you think about dressing up like a Muslim to prove that you're an ally to Muslims? No, that's weird.
I can't imagine who would do that.
Which brings us to question 8.
Have you ever intentionally made people think that you're a member of the LGBTQ community to win points, look cool, or get close? No, I spend a lot of time trying to convince people that I am not a lesbian, which sometimes is successful, sometimes is not.
Well, I am a member of the LGBTQ community, so I've never had to do that. Although I guess I feel like that gets into a lot of interesting politics about like what does a queer person look like? And I think I code particularly heterosexual, like just from what people know about my dating history and what it means to be one or the other. But I feel like we talk about it a lot in binaries, and I identify as bisexual. It's not really something that I ever feel like I talk about a lot, but I do feel more encouraged to talk about it in queer spaces where I feel like there is maybe a questioning of whether or not you are, like, can you hang?
Question 9 asks if they own a t-shirt that says ally, and both say no.
I don't think I'm an ally.
And here we are at question 10. Have you ever done a great deed, stood up for a group that wasn't present, and then told everybody about it?
I tell people that I vote all the time. I'm very into telling people that I voted. But otherwise, no, I don't think so.
Ginny gives a longer response to question 10. While she says she's never bragged about standing up for someone who wasn't present, she has gotten into fights with white members of her family who make racist remarks.
They've said something that I found problematic and then felt like I had to defend people of color or women, but I also feel like I'm part of those groups, so it's hard. It's hard to say that I like stood up for a group that wasn't present and then told everybody about it.
And lastly, it's bonus question time.
Do you select to withhold deodorant or bathe daily so everyone knows what kind of white person you are? I'm not white, so this is hard to know. I wear deodorant and bathe every other day more often than not.
What a good bonus question. No, I don't do that.
All laughs aside, almost immediately after taking the quiz, both Ginny and Liz were feeling pretty anxious.
Because I think I've thought a lot about my answers to her quiz, and I'm nervous she's going to be like, you failed. And I'm going to be like, oh no, but I have all these thoughts. And like, but Amy, let me tell you, like all the things that I was actually thinking, this is really what I meant. But like, whatever. I don't know. She's probably going to be like, you're both trash.
And I think I went into this feeling like I knew that I would be trash, and so I feel okay about that.
Right.
I think like when you guys, after I did the quiz and you were like, oh, Amy Hunter wrote this and is going to be judging, and I was like, oh, Amy Hunter. So.
Wait, why is it that?
Because she's so cool.
Coming up, we hear Amy grade the quiz and get the tables turned on her. Right before the break, you heard two besties, Liz and Jenny, taking what we're calling the Ally Quiz in our studios here in St. Louis.
Weeks after we gave Liz and Ginny the Ally Quiz, we invited them back to talk about it. And we brought in Amy Hunter, who wrote the quiz.
Yeah, and then all of us squeezed into this tiny studio.
It was pretty cramped.
So much so that Tim and I just kind of pressed ourselves against the wall and let them take over the mics.
And after the usual niceties were out of the way, Amy got straight to her grade.
No, don't give us a grade.
I don't know. I mean, I'm going to say B for sure. Because some of the questions I was like, they're not really being honest. That's how I felt. Mm-hmm. I was like, really? You've never like explained to somebody like you have a black friend like ever? That's like so typical. That's such a like, oh my gosh, well, I used to date so-and-so. Like I hear that so much. Or they'll ask like, do you know such and such? Like that one black person you know? Like it's not so uncommon here.
That could be a whole nother podcast. The one black person you know.
I never hear that. I don't know what you're talking about. No.
Oh, okay. But
happens all the time, actually.
But seriously, that does happen here, though I'm not sure it's just a St. Louis thing.
Yeah, and Ginny and Liz kind of pushed back on that notion as well.
I don't know. I don't feel like I have, but I totally
But
understand.
you're a person of color, too.
Yeah.
So that's
I
different.
totally understand
Yeah.
why you're like, I don't feel like that doesn't feel.
Yeah.
I think
Honest.
I'm super sensitive about the possibility of doing that and like have been for a long time, which is why it was hard for me. Like I can't think of an instance where I did that because I always am thinking through like, am I pointing out this one black person that I know?
But I appreciate you were like, I thought about it.
Yeah, I like think about it, but then I'm like, did I actually do that? I don't know if I did. And I think like, I mean, in St. Louis, I've experienced people definitely doing that.
And Amy says, look, some of this stuff happens really, really fast without you thinking about it.
But I mean, the truth is, like, many of the questions asked, like, I don't know, I didn't hear you guys like gasp, like, we would never thought or considered this ever. It's been more like, oh my gosh, this is so funny, or this is so bad. Like, but like, you could believe, like, these did not come randomly out of the air, but like, it could have happened.
Yeah.
Is also kind of a thing.
Well, I think that your quiz is super, like, for me, has been slow rolling because I was like, damn it, like, come on. This is so funny and, like, so intense. But then realizing later on, like, oh, no, this is real for some people. And, like, maybe people should be taking the quiz. Like, I just felt like for me, I was like, haha, I would never, you know. And we were talking about how after the words, I took a picture of the quiz and I, like, showed it to some people. And they were just like, you could tell they had this like awkward, like, do you want me to answer the question? Or
Yeah.
like, what do you want me to, what are we talking about? And I was like, oh, fuck. I think it was like slow realization process, but from being like super funny to 10,000 times like more horrifying than I could have imagined.
So you may be thinking, this has to be the end of the story.
Yeah, we kind of did. Because, I mean, when we came up with the idea, we didn't really think too much about what we would do after people took the quiz and it got scored.
In fact, after Jenny and Liz took the quiz, we started giving it to other people. And unbeknownst to us, Jenny and Liz started giving it to other people.
Like, obsessively.
There was a string of text messages and more conversation. They gave the Ally quiz to their friends and strangers in bars.
I just feel like we talked a lot about the quiz right afterwards. We were both sort of like, oh, like, what's happening?
And then they started jotting down questions of their own for Amy.
So Liz jokingly texted me the Sunday after we took the quiz and said, questions for our Ally quiz for Amy Hunter. Number 1, how often do you verbalize some component of your identity in conversation? Do you think about it before you do it? We're just like, and then the rest of the response for me is just like that emoji with the crying, laughing face. Because I do feel like what we took from that quiz is like, oh, this is a super aggressive way of being like, I'm asking you questions about your allyship that if you're either hip to it and you can laugh about it and joke about it, or it's like, if you don't get it, then you're failing in some strong way.
This sounds exactly like something me and my girlfriends would do, emojis and all. But seriously, even we were surprised by what our little experiment had sparked between these two friends.
So when Amy came to grade Jenny and Liz, we asked if she could stay just a little longer and take their quiz, and she agreed.
Are they really hard?
Are you ready?
So ready.
I don't know if you're ready.
Amy was ready, of course, for that first question about how often she verbalizes her identity.
Well, I'm Black, so I don't have to verbalize many components of my identity. Most people see me as a female, and I'm 5 feet tall. So, yeah, I kind of come at you. I think if there's anything I have to verbalize, it is like where my stance is, because I think people get really confused about me when they hear me talk about where I might stand on issues of race. So I think, there are kind of some camps of Black people that many white people and other people of color have put Black people in. So like a Cosby Black versus like a Good Times Black person. And so I might sound Cosby, but my allegiance and alliance is more Good Times. So I think that's been confusing for people for, if they're like, oh, isn't this great? Or like they'll describe another Black person to me as ghetto. It's like, you think that's okay? Like, it's not okay. Like, that's my people. I'm not going to let you talk about my people. Definitely not to me. So,
Right.
Liz and Jenny's questions involved a bunch of scenarios. Like, had Amy ever conflated Latino issues with immigrant issues?
I'm going to say that. Probably. Sure. Absolutely.
And what kinds of conversations she has with strangers when she travels.
I'm definitely going to ask them where to eat, but because I love to eat all kinds of food. But I'm going to bring up race. If I only have you for a minute, I'm definitely going to find out what you're thinking. Because I'm usually worried I've surrounded myself with people who think so much like me, like it's not helpful or useful. I mean, that's not fun and good. But I need to know like where other people are coming from all the time so we can reach out and get them too.
And then, of course, there was the, quote, articulate questions. As in, what does Amy do when someone, usually a white person, points out that she or another person of color is articulate?
Happens to me all the time.
I probably giggle first. I mean, I just think life's pretty funny, generally speaking. And I kind of think that's one that people should know not to say anymore. But I just called articulate. I think it was the day before yesterday. And I understood they meant it as a compliment. I usually just spend some time saying, hey, I know you probably meant that as a compliment. It's sometimes perceived this way. And because I know you're trying to say something nice, like you probably didn't want it to come off this way. And usually trying not to shame the white person or guilt the white person.
So Amy takes the education route.
Yeah, she's pretty good at that.
We certainly got a big dose of this about halfway through our conversation when Jenny quizzed Amy on something that made us all sit up a little straighter.
Number 6. Have you ever called anyone out for being an inadequate ally via public shaming or physical force?
Wow. Physical force, that's big. I really like to call people in instead of out. Like I'm a big one on that. So I'm not confused that white people suffer from white supremacy and white privilege, and it's not their fault. And so instead of like shaming them or shunning them, I'm more like, hey, I get that. Like, I'm really sorry that happened to you. And it's probably cost you some relationships, what you just said. So because I love you, I'm going to tell you like, that's not cool, or it doesn't represent your best self. When you say those things, people can't see the love or beauty inside you.
Dude, I need to like spend more time with this mind frame because I'm just like,
Let's practice that.
cut him out. Yeah.
Well, I mean, people got hurt. Like racism hurts white people. It makes them not kind or generous. It makes them feel entitled. And that costs them joy. And what I want is for people to have joy.
I feel like I'm not there yet. I like want.
Well, are you mad at them?
I feel like I'm mad at. Yeah, I'm mad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You're mad because some people get socialized to believe that they're better and more superior, and that fractures how they see themselves and the rest of the world.
Well, I mean, when you when you frame it that way, but I think that I think it's less that I get mad about. I get mad when I think somebody feels like they're on the level when they're not, and maybe it's because I just want like honest assessments of ourselves. And I do sometimes think, regardless of how you're socialized, like we are inherently selfish, and we are always trying to, I don't know, like make excuses for ourselves or whatever. And I think there's like, I am guilty of this too. But I think that that's what makes me mad, is like meeting people who refuse to even self-examine, even when presented with that.
So this need to self-examine, this urge to test ourselves and each other, it brought us back to the first big question we posed at the beginning of this episode.
Is there a right and wrong way to be an ally?
The two friends stuck to their positions. Jenny says yes, there is a right way, and Liz says being an ally is more of a construct and an everlasting goal. And Amy, she agreed with Jenny.
I definitely think there's a right and wrong way. I mean, I've had people name themselves as allies that weren't allies. Like when the rubber hits the road, they're not willing to be there. I don't think that's an ally. Or have taken, it's interesting because of Ferguson, I've seen people, white allies, who would have been like, yeah, we're totally down for it. But then like they get offered an opportunity that maybe a person of color could have had. And instead of being like, hey, I know I always get all these cool jobs, or I know you probably need somebody to talk about race, but instead of like even partnering with a person of color, I'm going to take up that space and be like your new race expert and like get all the praise and worship for like doing something great with Black people. And so in that way, I don't feel like you're an ally. But I think we do the best we can. Like I'm never surprised when white people say something racist, because that is always my knowledge and information that it's possible that it could happen. But if you're my ally, then that just means that you're with me long enough for me to say, hey, that really hurts my feelings, or hey, that probably is going to get in your way.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of class.
At least the end of this episode. And if you want to take Amy's quiz, you can. We're putting it on our website, welivehere.show.
And we'd love to hear your results.
So go take the quiz, give the quiz to somebody you like, or maybe somebody you don't like. I don't know, your business. Give it to a stranger and talk to them about it.
And then report back. Make a recording on your phone, those little voice memo things, and send us an email. It's info@welivehere.show. Maybe we can do a part 2 episode.
We Live Here is produced by me, Tim Lloyd.
And me, Camille Stanley.
Sheila Newman is the executive editor of St. Louis Public Radio and our editor.
Yes, and from St. Louis Public Radio and PRX, this is We Live Here.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.